Y'all, my homegirl sent me this article from the Business Insider yesterday, and I let out an audible laugh. I cackled. New parents in South Korea are getting $750 every month as Seoul launches its birth encouragement gambit to slow population decline. So they are going to give a whole $750 a month to Korean women to encourage them to go off and have some babies. I don't know why that made me audibly cackle, like an audible guffaw. But it did. Let's get into the article. Okay, so the bullet points on this article: Seoul officials on Tuesday announced a new birth encouragement program to raise fertility rates. The city of some 10 million is expected to spend 1.35 billion on new families. New parents in South Korea are eligible for $750 a month until their baby turns one. So 750 times 2, that's 1500. 1500 times 6 is not, they're eligible for a whole $9,000 because they're giving this until the baby turns one. So a whole $9,000 to put your body through this to have a baby. And yeah, I'm sure that $9,000 will go far. Okay, let's get into the article. Seoul is set to pour 1.35 billion into incentives and facilities aimed at convincing couples to marry and to have children as South Korea's fertility rates tumbles to hell. Oh, I'm sorry, continues to tumble. That's what it says. My bad. The new birth encouragement program introduces a bevy of financial benefits for family planning. The South Korean news agency Yonhap News reported on Tuesday. These include subsidies for women to freeze their eggs, making public spaces available for rent as wedding venues, and giving bonuses to companies that introduce pro-child policies. Sorry, pro-child care policies. My bad. The South Korean government also runs an allowance system that now gives all parents with a newborn $750 per month until their baby turns 1 year old. The sum used to be $520, but was raised to $750 at the start of 2024. After the child turns one, parents will also be eligible for an allowance of $375 a month for 1 year. I can't do that math in my head that quickly, but 400 times 12 is about 4,800. So a little less than 4,800. All right. If the child is already being sent to a child care center, a portion of the money will be dispersed through vouchers to offset attendance fees. Seoul also plans to introduce early morning child care center services, which allows parents to drop their kids off before school hours officially starts. The centers plan to provide transport for the children to go to and from school directly from child care facilities, and 100 families are expected to receive a foreign domestic helper in the first half of 2024 under a new pilot program. Where are they getting a domestic helper from? Okay. South Korea, like China and Japan, is suffering from a severe population decline that threatens to unbalance its economy in the coming decades, with a growing number of retirees having to rely on a dwindling supply of younger workers. Nearly a fifth of South Korea's entire 51 million population lives in Seoul, where the fertility rate was 0.59 in 2022. The entire country birth rate, by comparison, was 0.78 that year, still abysmal. Many young South Koreans, spooked by soaring housing costs and a steadily rising of cost of living, say they are putting off marriage and child rearing largely due to financial concerns. So, what I see is the government throwing money in the wrong direction. If these couples are saying, if these young single people are saying that it's the cost of living, maybe they should work on that part. If they say, if they are telling them specifically what the issues are and they're not working to address these issues, because getting money for 2 years of the baby's life is not going to offset how much it really costs to raise a child. And the cost of living is going around everywhere. Going up everywhere. So this is something that leaders have to address. I keep looking at these Asian countries whose replacement, I'm sorry, that birth rate is less than one, because I can see our country going there. Because you know what? Our country is so heavy handed and patriarchal in these red states, these Christo fascist states, that while they might get a bump right now because they are not allowing abortion. What they are going to do is make younger people that are watching these things clamp down, like the women in South Korea and Japan and China are saying absolutely not. And we really need to watch these economies and what happens with them, because this is really about, this could happen in our country and it could happen soon. Right now, what we're seeing with these Christo-fascist states and these policies that are pushing us towards a theocracy and the handmaid's tale, yeah, they're going to get a slight bump because they restricted women. But what happens when women just decide to leave men alone, period, because they can't get the reproductive care that they want? I'm watching these countries and I can't wait until the United States numbers come out as well so we can watch them. Okay. And in the caption, I'm going to tack on a Korean man who is giving the inside scoop on what is going on in Korea. So watch his two videos. If you're on my YouTube page, I'm just going to attach his videos now. All right. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.
A lot of people have a lot to say about Korean feminism these days and the way they completely want to keep men out of their lives, like the 4B movement, where they just swear off having children with men, or getting married, sleeping with men, or even just dating. Just to let people know, it's called a 4B movement because it's 4 no's. The word P means no in Korean, so P something means no this. And combined with the fertility crisis in Korea, this has become a very sensitive issue, but none of this is very shocking to me, that a lot of Korean women want to swear off men, because I've seen how bad Korean patriarchy can be. And this is very well represented in Korean literature, most famously in Kim Ji-young, born 1982. But what really told me the extent of how severe Korean patriarchy used to be was Please Look After Mom by Shin Kyung-suk. Aside from the main plot, which is about a family's struggle to search for their lost mother, the book describes the married life of the mother and the father, and it's set only, 2 generations away from my generation. And the patriarch in this portrayal doesn't work all that much, if at all. All he really is that he's the head of the family. She works, takes care of the kids, takes care of the home, while her husband does nothing and goes out to sleep with other women, drink with his friends, and do whatever he wants. At the end of the day, he can come back to the nest whenever he wants with no consequences of any kind. And that was apparently quite common in Korea before, where men don't do anything but just for existing, they were valued. The eldest male had power over everyone in the family and let nobody do anything without his consent, including other younger males like a little brother. This is 가부장제, a system where the eldest male takes all decision-making powers within the family unit. This is also 남아선호 사상, where they prefer male children to female children. Like, if women weren't able to produce male children, they were collectively punished by the rest of the family. Going back to Kim Ji-young, born 1982, the main character's little sister is aborted because she was a girl, and that happened very widely in the 80s and the 90s. People just aborted girls because they wanted boys. I mean, in the 60s, when medical technology wasn't, widely available and developed enough, they just throw infant girls away. Very akin to taking out the trash. That happened quite often in those times. And to me, people saying how radical Korean feminism has become don't realize that this is a proportional response to how bad it was for women, how they were just viewed as mere tools in Korean society before, how they were expendable outside of making babies, making sons more specifically. Everyone back in Korea called my mom 진우 엄마, meaning Chinu's mom. And actually back in Korea, all my friends' moms were called like this. 민우 엄마, 유리 엄마, 재성 엄마. And that was their names, basically. Only once in Canada, everyone called my mom by her name, and she finally wasn't just Chinu's mom anymore. And you may think this is trivial, but it's a part of how Korean society forces women into a role and makes them lose themselves in the process. And in the end, all that Korean women are asking for is to be treated like human beings and not go back to those days when they were nothing except their wombs. Yeah, I'd love to talk about this because a lot of people think that Korea having the lowest birth rate in the world is mainly due to women not having children, couples not being able to afford the cost of starting a family. But the reality is that the seeds of this crisis were something sowed by the government a long time ago. So as early as 1960s, the government initiated something called 산하제한 정책. Essentially, they wanted to limit births because back in the 1960s, poverty was a big problem and fertility rate was 6 kids per woman. So in order to improve the economic situation, the government started to encourage and incentivize people to have less babies. So there'd be public awareness campaigns everywhere with slogans like 많이나 고생 말고 알맞게 낳아서 훌륭하게 기르자. So meaning don't suffer with many children, but raise a few very well. They would give free sterilization services at clinics like free vasectomies. They would also give various benefits to families that underwent sterilization or have less children. This effort continued into the 1970s, where the government campaigned hard on 2 children as the ideal model of the family unit because despite all this convincing, people would basically have as many kids as possible in order to get a son. So if you had 2 daughters, a typical household would say, well, we have to have more because we don't have a son yet. To the government's credit, they noticed that people were doing this because of how the preference for male children was deeply embedded within their culture. So the government started campaigning on how daughters are amazing. Slogans like 잘 키운 딸 하나 열아들 안 부럽다, a good daughter is better than 10 sons, or 딸 아들 구별 말고 둘 만나 잘 기르자, either son or daughter, let's just have 2 and raise them well. And then in the 80s, the government campaigned even harder, encouraging for 1 child instead of 2. And then finally, fertility rate went below the replacement rate, which is 2.1 in 1983. To give you an example of how far the government went to discourage people from having more children, the benefits for households with 2 children or less included things like cash payments from the government, additional vacation days, maternity leave, subsidy for your children's education, and much more. So it was actually a big financial loss to have more children for people. The government also encouraged couples to get more abortions and actually gave out free abortions alongside free sterilizations. For instance, in the 1970s and the 80s, there was something called 낙태버스, which were these mobile clinics that would go around to rural areas and give free abortions. So the government kept this policy up until 1996, which is when they realized, oh wait, we've gone way too far now. So they tried to reverse that. But then in 1997, Korea had a catastrophic economic meltdown, and that further discouraged people from having kids for a while because when your life is financially destroyed, you don't want to have kids. And here we are now at 0.72, lowest in the world. So much of the current issues with low fertility in Korea is based on the government's actions through the 60s until the 90s. Because guess what? Academics and researchers agree that fertility decline is very difficult to reverse. But here's a side effect of these policies that might have also contributed to worsen the fertility rate. Remember how I said there was a culture of preference for male children? Well, when the government really made it undesirable to have more than 2 children or even 1, and when they made abortion widely available for very cheap or just free, a lot of couples just aborted girls in order to get boys. So what happens? A lot more boys come out, causing a massive imbalance in the gender ratio. Korea in the 80s and the 90s would be marked by huge gaps in gender imbalance, reaching as high as 116 men per 100 women and never going below 110 men per 100 women until 2003. So let's think about that. Let's say 100 men and 100 women get married and have kids. For almost 20 years, 10 to 15 men become leftovers. That affects how many babies will be born in the future because if the genders were more balanced, there would be more couples and no leftover men. At its core, fertility rates are driven by how many women are there to begin with because men can't give birth. And no, this isn't entirely on the government. It's also on the culture of Korea that used to devalue girls and favored boys. But, now you know, if there's anyone to blame for Korea achieving the lowest fertility rate in the world, it's mostly on the government.